It began with a sound. Not loud or urgent, but deep, like a hum, constant and vibrating under the skin. At first, no one noticed it, or at least no one said anything. It was the kind of sound you felt before you heard, like pressure in your skull or the weight of water building behind your eyes. I was in my car, idling outside the post office, listening to the radio drone on about weather patterns shifting unusually across the globe. Static cut through the announcer's voice every few seconds, which was becoming more common lately. Something about atmospheric anomalies, they said. No one seemed to care.
No one ever does, until it's too late. Around noon, the sky changed.
It wasn't gradual. One moment, it was overcast and gray like any other late autumn afternoon. The next, a ripple passed through the clouds like someone had dropped a stone in the atmosphere. The cloud split, not drifting apart, but peeling open to reveal a light that wasn't sunlight. It was silver.
Metallic.
Cold and vibrating like the hum in my ears. People stopped. Right there in the street, in parking lots, on front porches. I saw them. One by one, they tilted their heads upward, their mouths slack, their bodies going still like marionettes dropped mid-performance. I didn't look up. I don't know why. Maybe the sound was bothering me more than it did others. Or maybe something deeper, something buried in instinct, told me not to. I remember my mother once told me, never follow a crowd that doesn't speak. Silence is a warning, not peace. I didn't understand that as a child, but I did now. Because the silence around me felt wrong. Not peaceful. Empty. I rolled up my window.
Locked the doors.
Watched. A woman in a business suit stood at the curb, neck craned back, face bathed in the silvery light. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her expression never changed. Not even when she stepped out into traffic. The car that hit her spun out and slammed into a fire hydrant. The driver got out, dazed and bleeding, but then he looked up too. And then, he stopped moving. People were frozen like statues. Dozens of them. Not paralyzed exactly, they blinked. Some even swayed slightly, like they were breathing. But there was no life behind their eyes. It was like the light had taken something from them.
And still, the humming grew louder. I pressed my hands against my ears and ducked down in the seat, heart hammering like it wanted out of my chest.
My stomach churned like I'd swallowed broken glass. Every fiber in my body screamed at me to get away, to not look. Eventually, the light faded. The sky knit itself back together like stitches pulled tight. Clouds returned, darker now, heavier, but normal again.
I sat up slowly, sweat clinging to my skin.
They were moving again. The people who'd looked at the sky. But something wasn't right. The woman who'd been hit. She stood up. Her leg bent at a sickening angle. Her head tilted slightly to the side, like it hadn't fully figured out how to balance again. Her eyes darted around the street, but they were empty, hollow. She walked away like nothing had happened. Blood trailing in her wake. Silent. Unblinking. All of them did. They just walked off. I didn't go home that night. I drove out to the next town over. Booked a motel room under a false name. I didn't know what I was hiding from, but I knew I had to hide. The news said it was a weather event. A reflection of light off ice crystals in the upper atmosphere. The official report said there was a collective psychological reaction to the visual distortion, a kind of mass hypnotic episode. They called it the sky glare phenomenon. Bullshit.
I knew what I saw.
And more than that, I knew what I didn't see, myself, staring into that light. Over the next few days, the people who had looked started to change. At first, it was subtle.
They forgot things. Important things.
A woman forgot the name of her own child in the grocery store. A man was found sleeping in the middle of a dog park, mumbling equations in a language no one recognized. They weren't violent. Not at first. But they weren't themselves. It was like something had stepped in and rearranged them. Puppeteered them. Or worse, replaced them. I started writing down what I witnessed. Posting anonymously online. Some thought I was crazy. Some believed me. And then the messages started coming in. From people in other cities. Other countries. They'd seen it too.
Always the same pattern. A sudden ripple in the sky, a metallic light, a humming noise, and then silence.
And then, people who were no longer people.
He called my sister back home.
Begged her to tell me if she saw it. She hesitated. I don't remember, she said. But I think I dream about it. Her voice was different. Lighter somehow. As if there was a smile behind it, but not her usual one. Not her real one. I told her I'd visit soon. She said, "We're waiting for you." Not I. I haven't spoken to her since. A week passed. The sky remained calm. But reports of strange behavior climbed. Schools reported children drawing symbols no one could explain. People were waking up with soil under their nails and no memory of where they'd been. One man was found drowned in his own bathtub, with no water inside. And always, the same eerie silence in those affected. No screams. No pleas. Just watchful, robotic mimicry of life. I went back to my hometown after that. I shouldn't have. I parked down the block and walked to my childhood home. The air was different. Still and thick like it had weight. The houses all looked the same, but the lights inside flickered oddly, like candle flames struggling to stay lit underwater. My mother opened the door when I knocked. She looked normal. Smiled even. But her eyes, they were wrong. Too wide. Too glassy. Too empty. "We missed you," she said, voice soft.
Come in. Don't look at the sky.
I froze.
How did you?
She leaned forward slightly. It remembers who didn't look. That's when I ran. I don't even remember how I got back to my car, or how I ended up driving to a rest stop 2 counties away. I sat there all night, gripping the steering wheel, replaying her words. It remembers. There's something up there. Watching. Waiting. Choosing. And it knows. Those who didn't look are few. But I've found some. We're scattered, whispering on forums and message boards.
We stay moving.
Stay out of populated areas. Avoid the light. Avoid the humming.
We call ourselves the unseen.
Because we didn't look. But lately, I've started to hear the hum again. Louder. Closer. And I fear the sky won't wait for us to look next time. It'll come down and make us. I didn't sleep after I heard it again. The hum. It came while I was parked in the rest stop off Highway 8, miles from any real town, engine off, headlights dim. It wasn't as loud as it had been the first time, but it was there, low, almost hidden beneath the wind. The kind of sound that wraps around your bones instead of entering through your ears.
He sat frozen, staring into the rearview mirror, waiting for something to move behind me.
Nothing did. But the humming didn't stop.
He knew what it meant.
They were getting closer. The next morning, I headed north, toward the rural edge of the state, where phone signals were weak and the sky stayed hidden under a thick canopy of trees. I figured maybe that would help. Maybe the branches could block whatever it was. I didn't even know if that made sense anymore. I passed through several small towns. Most looked empty.
Windows boarded up. Cars abandoned mid-street.
At a gas station outside a place called Pine Hollow, I saw someone standing completely still next to a vending machine.
A young man, maybe 20, head tilted slightly back, eyes wide and glazed like a taxidermy display.
The machine next to him buzzed faintly, releasing static and an odd blue flicker from inside. I didn't stop for gas. I didn't stop at all until I reached what used to be an old church deep in the woods, now converted into a makeshift meeting house for people like me. I'd found it through a post buried in a private forum, coordinates and a simple message. If you didn't look, come here.
Before it finds you. Asterisco asterisco.
The doors creaked open when I approached, and for a moment I thought the place was abandoned. Then I heard whispering. Not loud.
Just beneath the threshold of clarity. Soft voices coming from the walls.
I hesitated, hand resting on the splintered wood, and forced myself inside. There were about 12 people scattered through the room, sitting on the pews, huddled near lanterns or fire barrels. Their faces looked worn, weathered, not by time, but by fear. A tall man with gray streaks in his beard stood and walked toward me. His eyes studied mine, as if searching for something invisible. "You hear the hum?" he asked. I nodded. He exhaled and gave a slight nod in return. Then you've been mocked. His name was Callan. He used to be a science teacher, he said. He was in the middle of a lesson on the electromagnetic spectrum the day the sky opened. Ironic, he muttered. I spent years explaining light to kids, and then something turned it into a weapon I can't even define. He believed what we saw, or didn't see, wasn't just light. It was communication. A signal. Something we weren't supposed to receive. But they did, he said, gesturing toward the door. The ones who looked. The changed. No one called them human anymore. They aren't mind-controlled, Callan explained. They're rewritten.
Like software patched mid-code.
I sat beside a woman named Rosie, who rocked slowly in place, clutching a notepad filled with frantic scrawls, drawings of spirals, symbols, and faces with hollow circles for eyes.
I saw my husband yesterday, she whispered.
He came to our old house. Not just like he used to. But his smile didn't match his eyes. He said things I remembered, but not in the right order. Like someone wearing his skin, reading from a script they didn't quite understand. That night, we stayed inside the church.
Nobody slept.
We kept the lanterns low, and no one looked at the sky. Through the broken windows, we saw shadows moving through the trees, figures too tall, too smooth in their movements. They didn't make sound. They didn't knock. But we knew they knew we were there.
At around 3:17 di notte, a piercing tone cracked through the silence.
It came from an old radio set up on the altar. We hadn't used it, hadn't even known it worked. But now, a voice came through. A voice I recognized. My sister. Jonah, she said. You don't have to run anymore.
We forgive you.
The voice was wrong, flattened, like it had been compressed into something synthetic. There was a beat of static, then she spoke again.
We remember what you were.
You can still come back. Just look. Look up.
The radio burst into flame.
Panic erupted. One of the men tried to run outside, screaming that it was in his head, that he had to know. We tackled him, held him down while he thrashed and cried. I dream of it, he wailed. I see the sky even when my eyes are closed. He quieted an hour later. Sat still. Didn't speak. By morning, he was gone. Vanished without sound or trace. His boots were left at the doorway, perfectly aligned and facing outward. That same day, Callan shared something he'd been studying, a pattern. Every 7 days after the first sky event, the humming returned.
A little louder. A little clearer.
He believed the intervals were some sort of countdown. That each pulse of sound was syncing the changed ones to a deeper signal. Something buried within them. Or something reaching through them. And that next week would be the final pulse. We debated what to do, run deeper into the wilderness, try to jam the frequencies, find other survivors. Then Rosie spoke up. There's another way, she whispered. A place where they take people who didn't look. Where they study them. Use them. Callan narrowed his eyes.
What place?
She turned slowly, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. The reflection facility, she said. I was taken there before I escaped.
It's underground. No sky. No mirrors.
Just people in white coats asking if I dream of metal. None of us had heard of it. She didn't know the exact location, but she said they kept it under an old power plant west of Lake Moira. Off-grid. Hidden. She escaped during a transfer after a fire broke out. Said the people there weren't all human. It was insane. But it was the first lead we had. We decided to go. The next 2 days were a blur of travel, sneaking through roads patrolled by the changed. We never saw vehicles anymore. They walked in clusters, some holding hands, others staring into nothing, faces twitching like radios tuning in and out. None of them blinked. When they turned their heads, it was always too sharp, like someone yanking a puppet by the strings. At night, we covered our eyes with makeshift masks lined with tinfoil and tape. It felt ridiculous, but it dulled the hum. Some of us, myself included, started to get nosebleeds every time the sound intensified. Like our bodies were rejecting it. Or succumbing to it. On the 3rd day, we reached Lake Moira. The water was black and still. Not a ripple, not even from wind. The power plant loomed just beyond the far shore, wrapped in fog and silence. It looked dead. But Rosie said that was the point. They built the facility underneath it, she said. The plant's a shell.
The real work is underground.
We waited until nightfall. Then we crossed. As we moved along the shore, I noticed something floating in the water. At first, I thought it was driftwood. Then I saw the eyes, open and wide. It was a person. No blood. No injuries.
Just drifting.
Face pointed up at the sky. One of them. We reached the edge of the plant and snuck through a rusted fence.
The building loomed above Stati Uniti, windows shattered, towers crumbling.
But as we stepped inside, something shifted. Heat. Lights. A low mechanical hum not unlike the one in the sky, but different. Sharper. Controlled. This place was still active.
We descended a stairwell lit by flickering red emergency lights.
Rosie led the way, her hand trembling as she counted the steps under her breath. She stopped at a wall covered in peeling paint. "It's here," she said. She pressed her hand against a panel that clicked inward.
A hidden door creaked open, revealing a narrow metal corridor descending deeper into the earth. The hum grew louder.
We stepped inside. And I swear, before the door closed behind us, I looked back.
Up through the broken ceiling.
At the slice of sky visible between beams. And for a split second, I think it looked back. We descended into the dark like miners heading into cursed soil.
The air grew warmer, damper.
The stairs spiraled far longer than made sense. My phone, on airplane mode, glitched. The screen stuttered, displaying strange symbols for half a second before going dark altogether. Rosie said that was normal. "They use pulses," she whispered, "to keep things asleep. Or under control." Nobody asked what things she meant. The hallway at the base of the stairs was lined with steel walls, smooth and colorless, like hospital corridors designed by machines.
Dim overhead, lights buzzed.
They flickered in sequence, as though reacting to our footsteps. Then we saw the first door. It was labeled Observation Bay 3, Human Retention. A narrow window allowed a glimpse inside, but only shadows moved beyond the glass. I leaned in. People. Sitting. Upright. Still. Some were strapped to chairs, their heads encased in clear plastic domes. Tubes ran from their necks to large metallic boxes pulsing with blue light. They were alive, but barely. Every few seconds, their bodies twitched, like they were being shocked from within. One of the men in our group, a young ex-paramedic named Milo, moved to open the door. Callan grabbed his wrist. "We don't know what state they're in," Callan warned. "And we don't have time to save anyone else." Milo shook his head. "But they're like us. They didn't look." Rosie interrupted, her voice flat.
"No.
They did look. That's what happens when the signal isn't finished syncing. That's mid-process."
We stepped away from the door. The hall split ahead. A sign hung crooked above the junction. Asterisco asterisco deep laboratory. Level R asterisco asterisco. Asterisco asterisco exit barra transfer tunnel asterisco asterisco.
We turned left, toward the lab. As we walked, I started hearing whispering again. Like the walls were remembering old conversations. Some of the voices sounded familiar, like my sister's, my mother's, but wrong, stitched together by something that only thought it understood human speech. The lab entrance was sealed by a keypad and biometric scanner.
Rosie stepped forward. "Let me TRY something."
She reached into her coat and pulled out a severed glove, still holding a discolored human hand inside. Everyone froze. "I told you I escaped during a fire," she said. "What I didn't say was, one of them tried to stop me." She pressed the hand to the scanner. It hissed.
The door clicked open.
The lab was massive. Rows of upright cylinders filled the room, each containing a suspended figure, human in shape, but wrong. Too tall. Too symmetrical. Skin pale as chalk, with veins that glowed faintly blue. Their eyes were open and completely white, like they were watching us without moving. Above them, machines blinked and beeped. Screens showed neurological maps, brainwave graphs, and something labeled mimetic resynchronization, Phase 3. "This is where they build them," Callan muttered. Or rebuild them, I said. In the corner of the lab, we found a large monitor playing footage on loop. People standing in a park.
Looking up. The silver light flooding the scene.
Then glitchy close-ups, flesh rippling, eyes flashing white, mouths repeating phrases out of sync with their expressions. And then, black text. Conversion successful.
Awaiting uplink. Asterisco asterisco.
There was one final video file, labeled simply, Skycast \_0.
Asterisco asterisco.
We played it. A man in a lab coat appeared on screen. His eyes were sunken. His voice was shaky. If you're seeing this, then the tether held. But not for long. We tried to block the signal, but it found us anyway. They don't just rewrite the mind, they overwrite reality. They're not from here. Not from space. Not even time. They're from above in ways we don't have language for. Looking is just the start.
Listening. Asterisco changes you. Asterisco.
Static overtook the screen. Then a single frame. A dark silhouette with dozens of arms. No face. Just a ring of rotating eyes. And behind it, the sky, split open like torn fabric. The screen went black. Milo backed away, breathing hard. We have to destroy this place. Callan nodded. There must be a main power core. If we can overload it. He didn't finish his sentence. Because just then, one of the figures in the tube opened its mouth. No sound. Just movement. Then another. And another. Soon, the entire lab echoed with silent screaming from behind the glass. Their limbs began to twitch violently. Their spines cracked against the transparent walls. Lights began to flash. Sirens wailed overhead.
Rosie spun toward the door.
We have to go. We ran.
Back into the hall.
Toward the transfer tunnel. But as we reached the split, the lights went out.
Complete darkness.
And then, asterisk footsteps. Asterisk.
Not running.
Not rushing. Slow.
Rhythmic. Coming from the stairwell.
We kept moving through the transfer tunnel, slick with condensation, the air smelling like burnt metal. At the far end, we reached a large metal chamber.
Inside, an elevator.
Old, rusted, but operational.
Callan slammed the button.
Behind us, the footsteps stopped. I turned. There was someone at the other end of the tunnel.
Just standing there.
A child.
A girl, maybe 7 or 8.
Wearing a white dress. Her head tilted. Her hands twitched slightly, as if her joints weren't fully connected. She opened her mouth. And then every voice we'd heard since this began came pouring out at once, screaming, whispering, crying, laughing. All overlapping in a hellish choir of wrongness. The elevator doors opened. We piled in and hit up. As it ascended, the walls of the shaft glowed faintly. And then we heard it again. The hum. But this time, it came from within. Like it was in our blood now. I looked at the others. Their faces reflected the flickering light, pale and drawn. Rosie was bleeding from her nose. Callan was gripping the metal rail so hard his knuckles had gone white. Milo began muttering numbers under his breath. We burst out into the top floor of the power plant and stumbled into open air. The sky above us had turned a strange shade of green-gray. The clouds were moving wrong, against the wind, folding in on themselves. But we didn't stop. We sprinted through the fence line, into the woods, deeper, farther, until we collapsed by a dried-up stream, gasping.
Silence.
Then Rosie spoke.
It's not over.
That lab was just one node. What do you mean? I asked. She looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. They've seeded hundreds of these. All over. Under schools. Churches.
Stadiums.
The Sky event was just a broadcast.
The real change is happening asterisco underground. Asterisco.
Callan stared up at the twisted sky. Then we're already too late. No, Rosie said. Not yet.
The last pulse, the final it sentì come. He stood, legs shaking.
Then we stop it. She shook her head.
We asterisco can't asterisco stop it.
Then she turned to me. But we can warn the others. It's strange how quickly the world can fall apart without anyone screaming. That's the part that still haunts me. Not the creatures, not the sky, not even the conversions. It's the quiet. The kind of quiet that feels wrong. Heavy. Intentional. Like someone's holding their breath just behind your shoulder, waiting. After escaping the underground lab, we camped deep in the forest, huddled around a dying fire, surrounded by whispering trees. None of us spoke for hours. The fire popped and crackled, but even that felt too loud, like it was drawing attention. Callan had drawn maps in the dirt, lists of potential broadcast sites, based on what Rosie had revealed. Power stations.
Relay towers.
Underground facilities she'd only vaguely remembered from her captivity. There was one place they all connected to.
Asterisco asterisco Black Hollow Array. Asterisco asterisco.
A long-abandoned satellite relay compound in the mountains. Built in the 70s. Decommissioned in the 90s. But Rosie insisted that's where the final pulse would be triggered. "They don't just need us to look," she whispered that night, hands trembling, voice barely audible over the crackling of the fire. "They need us tuned to them. All of us. Synchronized. The last hum, it doesn't just finish the conversion."
It asterisco wakes summiting. Asterisco. Summiting where?
I asked. She didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the sky.
Trattino. The road to Black Hollow was fractured and overgrown.
We couldn't drive the whole way. The further we got from the nearest town, the fewer signs of humanity we saw. Cars turned to rusted-out shells. Houses stood empty, furniture left mid-meal, children's toys frozen in the dirt like fossilized memories. We passed 3 different people standing completely still in the fields, their heads tilted toward the sunless sky. None of them blinked. None of them moved. We didn't speak to them. We didn't even look too long. By the second night, Milo started hearing the hum in his dreams. "It's like a lullaby," he said, swaying near the fire. "Soft.
Sweet. Familiar."
We had to restrain him twice. He kept trying to wander off in the night. Callan suggested sedating him, but we had nothing strong enough. Rosie whispered about the people she saw in the tubes. How some of them were given sedatives to slow the conversion. Others were left fully awake during the process. She said their eyes bled last. That night, I had a dream. I was standing in a white room, with walls that pulsed like a heartbeat. My mother stood across from me, smiling. She held out her hand. "Now you understand," she said. "Looking isn't submission. It's coming home." When I woke, there were scratches on my arm. Deep ones. I'd clawed myself in my sleep. The hum was getting stronger.
Trattino.
We reached the edge of Black Hollow just before dawn.
The compound sat like a dying corpse in the mountain valley.
Dozens of massive satellite dishes pointed toward the cloud-choked heavens, rusted and covered in vines. A concrete bunker sat at the base of the tallest tower, its entrance partially buried under debris. And above it all, the sky had changed. The clouds had formed a perfect circle.
Dead center above the array. No sunlight. No moonlight.
Just a churning vortex of gray.
"We're running out of time," Callan muttered.
We approached the bunker entrance slowly.
Rosie found a narrow access hatch buried behind a broken generator.
We pried it open and dropped inside.
Inside, they're buzzed.
Not just with electricity, but with a pressure that wrapped around our skulls. A low frequency that made our teeth ache. This wasn't just a relay center anymore. It was a beacon. Rows of machines lined the chamber. Some flickered weakly. Others pulsed with a steady rhythm, as if waiting for the final signal to activate. In the center of the room was a giant cylindrical device, throbbing with blue light.
"The pulse core," Rosie whispered. "That is what transmits the final hum."
Not just to the changed, but to the rest of us. She walked toward it. "I think it's already counting down." The humming intensified as we approached.
My vision blurred.
Milo stumbled and vomited. Callan dropped to one knee, pressing his hands over his ears. And then, a voice echoed through the chamber. Low. Mechanical.
Genderless.
Synchronization complete. 96%. Final hum preparation initiated.
Please stand by.
Rosie turned to us, eyes wide. It's minutes away. We moved fast.
Callen scanned the machines for a control panel.
Rosie traced cables from the pulse core to a power distribution hub. Milo, still shaking, knelt by a blinking console and muttered something about feedback loops. I stood by the stairwell, watching, waiting, because I knew what was coming. I felt it before I saw them. They changed. They came down the steps like shadows made flesh, tall, twitching, skin pale and glistening. Eyes white and glowing faintly. Faces stretched in permanent half-smiles. And they didn't walk. They glided. I yelled for the others. Rosie spun, hand on the ignition array. Cover me. Callen grabbed a fire axe from the wall and stood beside me. 3 of them reached the base of the stairs. Then one spoke. But it didn't use words. It used every voice I had ever known. My father. My teacher.
My childhood friend.
My sister. All layered. All wrong. You don't have to fight it, it said. You are already inside. I swung the axe before it got closer. The blade cut through the air, and passed clean through the thing like smoke. No blood. But it recoiled. Shimmered.
Callen pulled me back.
They're projections. Or something worse, I whispered. Rosie screamed from across the room. I can overload it. But someone has to hold the switch. Callen didn't hesitate. He ran toward her, nodding once at me. The look in his eyes told me everything. He wasn't planning to walk away. Buy us a minute, he said. I turned back toward the figures. More were coming now. Dozens. They filled the stairwell. Poured from the walls.
Eyes blazing. Faces familiar.
I saw my mother among them. My best friend from high school.
My old neighbor.
All of them with that same eerie half-smile.
He stepped forward.
And I looked up. Straight into their faces. And I screamed. Not in fear.
In asterisco defiance. Asterisco.
Because if this was the end, I wanted it to know I chose not to look before.
I cose asterisco not asterisco tu obey.
The pulse core exploded behind me. A wave of light surged through the room. Blinding. Screaming. Infinite.
Trattino.
I woke up 2 days later. In a hospital. Real one, I think. Rosie was there.
Covered in burns.
Milo too, though he was still unconscious. Callen didn't make it. The facility was gone. Wiped out.
The power surge knocked out electricity for 40 miles.
The official story was some nonsense about an old military satellite relay experiencing thermal collapse. No one questioned it. Not publicly. But things changed after that. The hum stopped. The people who had been changed. Some went still.
Frozen in place.
Some vanished. Others seemed to revert. Mostly. But not all the way.
Not ever again.
And the sky. Well, the sky is normal again. Mostly. But sometimes when I'm alone, late at night, I see a shimmer in the clouds. A ripple that shouldn't be there.
And I feel it again.
The hum.
Faint. Like something just waiting. Waiting to asterisco finish what it started. Asterisco.
I thought it was over. That we'd stopped it in time. That Callen's sacrifice and Rosie's knowledge had broken the cycle. The final hum never reached 100%. The sky sealed itself back into gray stillness. The whispers went quiet, for a while. But it's never really over, is it? Not when they know you exist. Not when you've been seen. I was discharged from the hospital under a false name, thanks to a nurse whose eyes stayed fixed on her shoes the entire time. Her hand trembled when she handed me the clipboard. You shouldn't be awake, she said quietly. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't want to know. Milo didn't wake up. He lay there, breathing, but his brain activity was flat. No dreams. No reaction. Just that soft, humming vibration inside his chest every time they checked his vitals. Rosie and I left in the middle of the night. She'd grown quiet since the facility. Detached. She barely spoke as we rode in silence, past towns that looked like normal places again. But we both saw the signs.
Too many missing person posters.
Too many closed until further notice signs. Too many eyes that didn't blink long enough. Rosie pulled over on a long stretch of empty highway, her hands tight on the wheel. She stared out across a flat, black field with dying crops and a single scarecrow that had no face. Then she said it. They weren't trying to change us. I turned to her. What? They weren't trying to make us something else. They were trying to make us recognize what we already are. I didn't understand. Not until she reached into her coat and pulled out a mirror. She hadn't looked in one since we left Black Hollow. None of us had. We'd even taped over the rearview mirror in the car. She held it up.
Just for a moment.
Then dropped it like it burned her. I picked it up, heart pounding. When I looked into the glass, my face was still there. But something was wrong. My reflection blinked before I did. And it smiled.
Trattino.
We spent the next week tracking online chatter. Deep forums. Unindexed servers. Places where people still whispered in code, desperate for answers. The change hadn't stopped. It had just slowed. Reports of Skywatch events trickled in from remote areas.
Quiet disappearances.
Children who stopped speaking after watching static on television. People walking backward into rivers and never surfacing. A woman in Romania posted that her husband had returned from a camping trip completely mute, but now her clocks kept rewinding when he was in the room. A teenager in Arizona live-streamed a voice telling him to climb to the roof and look up, then vanished mid-broadcast, his camera spinning as it caught a flash of metallic light in the clouds. And in every single one of these reports, they said they heard the hum again.
Trattino.
One night, I found an old file posted by someone calling themselves Node_9. It had no metadata, no source, just a single .txt with one line. The signal is not from beyond the stars. It is from above thought, above what we are allowed to know. Attached was a map.
Not offert. Of something else.
A layered grid, with overlapping dimensions marked in rings. And at the center, a shape, rough and eye-like. Labeled only as
**observer***.
I asked Rosie what she thought it meant. She said, I think we mistook them for aliens. But they're not invaders. They're reminders. Reminders of what? She looked up at the cloudless sky. That we've never been alone inside our minds.
Trattino.
3 weeks later, Milo woke up. But it wasn't him anymore. He spoke in code. Numbers. Coordinates. Strange geometric descriptions that made no sense. He didn't respond to our voices. Didn't ask where he was. Just kept repeating one phrase. The sky is only a lens. It was never the source. We left him with trusted contacts, scientists, survivors, others who hadn't looked but had heard enough to believe. And then we went dark. We burned every phone. Changed our names. Stayed on the move. Cities were the worst. Too much signal. Too many screens.
Too many reflections.
But we couldn't stay hidden forever. Because something had changed inside of us too.
Trattino.
Rosie started having dreams. Or memories. She said they weren't hers, but she felt them. She described being part of something enormous, like a swarm of light and sound, moving across dimensions, broadcasting identity. She said it wasn't cruel. It was curious. It just wants to know us, she whispered. But the way it knows is invasive. I asked her what she meant. She said, it remembers you backwards.
Trattino.
Then one night, in an abandoned farmhouse in Colorado, I woke up at 3:17 a.m. The hum was back.
Louder than ever.
Not outside. Inside.
Inside my Benz.
I stumbled to the window and looked out into the night. The stars were gone.
Just a ole in the sky.
Round. Perfect. Like someone had drilled through the heavens. And then I heard it.
All the voices at once.
Rosie's.
Caleb. My mother's.
Milo's.
Just look, Jonah.
I fell to my knees, clutching my ears. Screaming. Not in fear.
In recognition.
because I finally understood what Rosie meant. We weren't being changed. We were being restored to something that had seen them once before, long, long ago.
Before memory.
Before species. Before thought.
Asterisco template. Asterisco. A design.
The observer wasn't new. It was coming back to see what had become of its first creations.
Trattino trattino.
I don't know what happened after that night.
Iwoke a pallone. Rosie was gone.
No note. No sign of a struggle. Just her coat, folded neatly on the bed. And beside it, a drawing, etched into the floorboards with the tip of a knife.
A single symbol. A perfect circle.
With dozens of eyes orbiting the edges.
Trattino trattino. Now we travel.
Still hiding.
Still listening. The world feels quieter now.
But that's the danger. Because silence is not safety. Silence is when the signal resets. And when people forget. That's when they look again. I still hear the hum sometimes. In empty buildings.
In the space between static on old radios.
In the breath between heartbeats. And I know what it means. The observer isn't finished. It's still watching. And the next time it opens the sky, it won't ask. It'll rewrite everything.